So, so let me ask you first of all who you are, what you are up to, and what your experience slash what you know about Christian education in India particularly.
Yeah, my name's Mario Peter, from Mumbai. Grew up in Mumbai, lived here all my life. I pastor a church here called Light of Life Community Church. Um, about Christian education, I grew up studying Christian education from the first grade all the way till my ninth grade, and then gave my 10th grade through the normal government board systems. My mom had started a Christian school. Actually, another lady had started it in 91, and my mom joined it in 91, after a few months after she had started it. We were staying in a different part of the city of Mumbai. We moved to this part where the school was, and my mom joined it, and she took us when we were young, joined it. And she had the lady who started it had some illnesses, and so she wanted to shut it down in a year's time. I think it was 92. But the other parents really loved the concept and they wanted all their children to have it. And a lot of them were city pastors from Mumbai. And so they said, we'll be with you, we'll encourage you, we'll help you go on. And so she had trained under that other lady for a year. And so she started. So from 92 onwards, she continued the school. It went through different phases, different people try to help us through the whole thing. Uh, But I think I've not come across only much later. I came across other schools which wanted Christian education per se, but even many of them just wanted moral values and not biblical inculcations. Whereas Mummy School was everything Bible based, so be it history or science or and then when we would dive into the Indian system, um, we were using an American curriculum, which would set the base. And so she had set it in such a way by the time we come to like the sixth grade, Indian history starts being taught instead of American history. And then by the eighth, seventh grade, we're doing Indian textbooks, but we're also referring to the American textbooks. But all of that is still being spoken from a, though the history is taught and everything else is taught, spoken from a biblical worldview and saying what does the Bible say? What is the final authority that the Bible says? Um, yeah, that's the background I grew up in. Uh, the school shut down in 2020, just before the pandemic, because people had lost interest now in it. I think with the spread of the prosperity gospel and so many other things, people are more interested in like Christians themselves who were once hungry for this are no longer interested in Christian education. They wanted to send their kids to schools which offered other things like swimming pools and football games and sports and all those kind of things, and a bigger school which looked more appeasing to the eye. So and so the people who did come were mostly not very wealthy, and then with the rise of the pandemic, having to provide for the school was being hard. So that's why we shut it down. But that's the school I grew up in. I was there. I studied in that. My younger brother also studied in it, and a lot of my friends who are abroad now, and some of them in India also studied in that same school. Yeah. Maybe you should ask me more questions if you get something, and then I can like talk more.
Yeah. Let me do that. I have some loaded up right here. To begin with, uh, let me ask you this. So you're a Reformed Baptist, right?
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
that is like a unicorn for me, especially in India. Just seeing someone reformed, especially like in my background, I never grew up with any reformed people. kind of
Hmm.
reformed ish in college with some other people, some of my friends. And so, like, from what I remember, either hearing from you or just reading on your church website, is that your church didn't start out Reformed Baptist, right?
No, yeah, no, the church didn't start. My church was part of a group of churches,
Hmm.
from which this sister also was part, who started that Christian school. They were
Hmm.
charismatic, but the original church was Baptist. And
Hmm.
then, like in the 70s, when the charismatic renewal started happening, movement in India, a lot of them gave up all their Baptist heritages and started becoming charismatic. So it was a charismatic church that I grew up in. When I grew up in school, the charismatic movement was still more in its nascent stage, in the sense that prosperity gospel and the word of faith movement, and now NAR and all of those influences were very basic, at least in India and in Mumbai. So though the school was charismatic, it it still had some good Bible base. At least the gospel was clear, and all the other base of what the Bible is uh, was still there in the school. And I think my mother was a godly woman. She loved Christ. And even though some other churches wanted more like a moralistic kind of schools, she didn't drift that way. She stuck to the Bible. Yeah. So yeah, the background that I come from is charismatic. Then that church started when I moved out of that school, and I think when I was in junior college and towards the end of my school, I think that's when the prosperity then started coming in, the prosperity gospel. And so the church was influenced. And much later, the NAR also. The church that I was pastoring was part of this group of churches, which was NAR. And I came across Reformed theology in 2012 by a sermon, which I came across by John Piper, which was on marriage. And the title caught my attention. I'd heard Piper before, but I didn't like it. But the title caught my attention. It was on marriage is not only about falling in love or something like that. And so I was like, I thought marriage is all about love, because we were a very moralistic church, which I came from, my background. And so what Piper said seemed something different. And he was speaking about covenant keeping in it. And so he was speaking about Christ in the church. And wherever there was something that we need to do, he kept bringing the gospel in it. So that's the first time I heard the gospel, not just that Jesus came and died for us, we're sinners and all that stuff, but also applied to our Christian living and how it transforms us and things like that, which I had never heard, because the moment we would come there was always moralistic in the past. And so that got my curiosity devoured, desiring God, TGC, and all those Vodi Bokim and all those other things. And that's how I started learning about theology and researching more. In 2000, I think 16 or 17, 2016, I became an elder of the church that I'm pastoring. 2018, we left it because they didn't want me to do church the same way we were progressing. I was trying to do expository preaching, and they were like, expository preaching will not attract people, it will only attract older people. It won't help the church grow, and all those kind of things. Also, having formal membership, they said that will not help the church grow. So a lot of other things also. They wanted to have seeker sensitive activities in the church. And so I didn't want to go that route because I already came from that route. And so we had to leave. And then there were some major issues like the whole NAR kind of thing. And then especially their understanding of signs and wonders was like Christ on the cross brought healing and deliverance and all these other things, and signs and wonders. So the gospel is something that makes you a Christian, but for you to live your fullness of a Christian is you need to have signs and wonders, is what they were saying. And so I was like, just like the Roman Catholic Church, as it works, you're having signs and wonders. And back then, I was still a continuationist. I'm not a continuationist now. I was telling them, well, believe the same things that you all believe, but the only thing is that you're equating it with the gospel. I'm saying that's not part of the gospel. It's separate from it. It's something that God gives, and they were not agreeing to it. And so that was like the breaking point because the gospel was at stake. And so uh, I brought it to my church, and then our church decided to leave together. So we left that and we continued on. Yeah.
Okay, that's good background. But from what I hear is, in the 90s, especially when that other lady started the school. What's the name of the school, by
It
the way?
was first called Christian Education,
Oh,
then sorry, Christian Academy,
hmm,
and then it was called the group of churches in Mumbai called New Life. It's a charismatic group.
hmm,
They decided to take it. The church that we were part of, we told them to take it, and they didn't want to take it because they only wanted to do the moral part of it. They didn't want Christian education. They said, well, have one subject called the Bible, but remove everything else because your school will not grow. You cannot make money out of this. And so my mom was like, I left, she was teaching in a secular school system before, and she left that, which was paying her really well. She left that and she came here. And she said, I didn't leave everything to go back to secular education. I came here for Christian education. And this is what I desire that people should get. And
wow.
that is the answer for people. And so then, so they were not really helping us. So we took a help of another church, which is called New Life Academy. So that's the second phase. And then after some time, there's a prominent, I don't want to use a name now. He's a big figure now. There was a prominent person who became a so-called believer.
Hmm,
And the all these charismatic churches said, man, this guy's a believer now. He's got like the biggest chain of schools in the world and even in India in that sense. So you should give it to him. He's a Christian now. And so he thought, I think what he thought was this is going to make me good money because it's American curriculum, it's this Christian values. Back then still people wanted to learn English and so they
hmm,
wanted to, they liked Christian schools. So people went there. So he took it on board. It was then called Ryan Christian School. Uh, but then they took the same route, and then they told mom that after like 3, 4 years, they knew that this is not working in the sense that they were not able to make money. Because when people would come for admission who are not believers, we tell them, hey, listen, we're going to teach the Bible in like all subjects. And so if your son's coming here, your daughter's coming here, they'll be taught the Bible. Are you okay with it? Because they were unbelievers. And so most of them were like, we don't care. You can teach them that. We just want them to become smart. But some of them didn't want that. And so sometimes people would go away. And so they didn't like that. And then also different values. Normally in an Indian education system, the teacher yells at you and throws her dust on your face and all those kind of things, right? Uh, Mummy's school had like a teacher-student relationship was like almost like they were the parents, and so they would work with love. Though they would at times correct us, but the default was not always just yelling and throwing things around. It was more love-based and more gospel-centric in the sense of this is sin and therefore you should not do it. Christ has redeemed you from that. So the approach was much more different and much more softer, which they didn't like. They were like, if you use these approaches, it's not going to work. You need to just take the rod and whip one guy up so that the others get scared. That's how you control the crowd. So there were a lot of things. And so then she had to come out. They then basically said, we will only run it if it's a moralistic school. And so she said, well, that's not what I wanted to do. So then they said, since it's now under our care, you will need to leave and go. And they took the whole school over. And so she left and she restarted again.
wow.
I think this is 2014 or something. And she called it the King's School. And some friends of ours from Canada had a school called the King's School in Canada.
Hmm.
And she was influenced by that name, and even in the UK. And so therefore we call it the King's School. And then we got it registered and then ran it till the pandemic. Uh, yeah.
I see. I see. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So that's quite a, it's not just a linear history. there's been back and forth between uh,
Yeah.
what they call mission drift, right? Like you
Mm,
uh, drift away from the temptation comes to drift away from what you initially. And what I appreciate about what you said is your mother chose to burn the thing down, so to speak, rather than give up the vision, uh,
mm,
which is, I
yeah.
think, a really good model for us to follow, especially like in India, where there are no institutions for us to rely
Mm,
on. We need to be like gypsies, take our tents wherever we go. So anyway,
mm.
let me ask you this: how many students would you say, on an average, were enrolled in? Do you know, like in your time, and then
I
more?
think at its peak, there were like about maybe 250
Okay.
students, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we had till the 10th grade. And when mom restarted, I think at that time, in at its peak, I think there were like 67, or I think maybe no more than that, maybe 80, 90 students. Yeah. Uh, yeah.
You
And
mean?
she also, I think there was just like when it came to not only the scripture stuff, but also when it came to like the quality of education, normally people would look down and say, "Hey, man, like, what kind of school is this? Your education quality will be really low." But I think in a whole journey for the 10th grade, like the board exams, there's only one person who failed, and that person also just came only to give the 10th directly, and they never studied. But apart from that, whoever gave the 10 would always top the list.
Hmm.
They would at least one person would come in the top 10 every year. So,
Good. That's encouraging to hear. So you mean like 67 students in the entire school, right?
yeah,
Not
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Good. So it's small, it's manageable. And
Hmm.
let me ask you this. You did already touch upon this all somewhat. So the curriculum that you were following was an American curriculum, is that right? With
Yeah.
some supplements, particularly in Indian history. Uh,
Hmm.
do you still have those like curriculums, at least access to them, that I could take a look at, maybe like some websites or something, or uh,
Yeah, yeah. Um, so a lot of it was, so we use Abeka, which is from the US. Have you heard of Abeka? I think it's from Florida or something. Um, so we use Abeka, and it's excellent in phonics, and it's got like the whole creation stuff and everything in its base. Um, but like I said, from the
it's
first, second, third, we slowly start transitioning into Indian curriculum.
hmm,
That transition stuff was more like my mom's own curriculum that was made. She's just written it down. I'll have to search her papers. There was not many computers that day, and she had not learned how to use a comp. So there's not much on it. Uh, or even like the modules of what they taught from the Indian ICSE and SSE things in the early days. Uh, she just taught it to the teachers, and the teachers taught it, but I don't know if she wrote it down somewhere and kept. My mom has early stages of Alzheimer's now, so uh, if I wanted all these resources, I can't get it from her else because she most likely might have forgotten some of these things. Uh, the
okay.
how.
Okay, yeah, particularly with Indian history, that comes to mind, because that's one thing which American curriculum cannot give us, and at the same time, our Indian books are very deficient. They're so meager. Like, looking back, class 10th me would not think they were meager, because it would take me so long to get through those chapters and prepare for exams. But looking back now, I see it's just facts. It's just a raw data that's given to us. It's not worldview, it's not informing you in any way. It's not teaching you a story about yourself, which I think is the purpose of history. Anyway, so
Yeah.
there's not
Wh-
much.
What we would do is, I remember like our teachers teaching us, and then we would be like, "But was that right? What he did? Or wasn't this just selfish of this king the way he's done this thing?" So those were the questions that we'd ask, and that's what we would talk about, like the sin behind their doing it, and what history teaches us is sinful in that way, and the way they did things, and how it's not Indian history that can save you, but only Christ who can save you. Not even American history or nothing else, but it's only Christ can save you. So. Yeah, I think just bringing the Christian value system into it, and while we're just reading all the 10 standard stuff that you read, but also seeing how it applies to us and how it doesn't apply and what we can learn from it, biblical values.
Did Was anything about, say, church history, Indian church history taught? You
No,
think?
man. No.
Okay,
I don't think so, no.
okay.
Yeah.
How
That
Christianity
would be
entered India?
interesting. I think that there was some of it. I think because some of the we did ICSE, and so when they spoke about the Renaissance and other stuff and all, so there was world history, and so there was about Calvin and other things and what's happening in the rise of Christianity in the West and all that was something we studied if you studied ICSE back in those days. So there was some of it. And so there might have been some passing thing in it, but not very clearly. I think if we'd have to do Christian education today, we'd want to bring it in more clearly and add
Okay,
more things, especially to do with the Indian Christian history also.
good. Okay, that's good input. Um, and what about? It seems like there was one church where a lot of this was coming from. That lady, then your mother. So clearly, those people had a vision for Christian education in that space. How connected was the church to the school? How integrated was the life of the students worshiping God? Uh,
The So that the local church that we were part of was not too interested with this, but a lot of the other churches in the city, and most of them, so they were charismatic, Methodist, mainline churches, all of them were interested, and a lot of the pastors liked it, and so they would get their own children to be part of it, and then they would also tell their church members, and so some many of them moved and shifted from even like the posher sides of Mumbai, like the South Bombay, to this side of Mumbai, which was not very posh, and so that they can be part of the school. So yeah, and then a lot of them were all functional in their churches, their pastors' kids. They and because we had music, a class like music, and because they had like even a time of worship, like back then it was charismatic, so more of singing and music and all that things. But still, I think something that plugged them back so that they go back into their church. A lot of them would rely to these kids because they were equipped with this at a very young age. Yeah,
okay, thank you. That's helpful. So it was that you were not just connected. So people in your church were not so excited about it, but uh, generally speaking, like larger body of Christ was interested in what you were doing.
mostly. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Some from ours also from our group, and a lot of them would call up for training. Especially our church had started something uh, they called teachers training. So my mom would go and teach them. But after they all did that, so again, those were just mere moral principles. But when they'd have to, many one of them would ask them, "Hey, where can we see a school where we can practice these principles or where these principles are taught?" They would end up bringing them to my mom's school. And when they bring them here, like, hey, these guys are like openly talking about Jesus. You told us not to openly talk about, just say God. Like God loves you. Don't say Jesus loves you. And those kind of things. Or Jesus died for you. Just say that God came and he died for people. Like these guys are talking openly about Jesus. And so my mom was like, yeah, we are all out for. Christ and Christian education. Like, we don't believe you can just give moral principles. So a lot of other schools came. There were, I think, at one point there was a Korean lady, South Korean lady. She came. She studied under mom. She went and started school. There were people who would come and train under her for a year, and then they would go to different parts of India and start schools. I don't know what happened or where they've gone now, but I know people who would come train, and then she would go and train schools in different parts of Mumbai, Maharashtra, and sometimes even other places also. So that also was slowly happening over time. Yeah.
Okay. What was the name of the founding lady and the name of your mother?
The founding lady was Debbie Rodericks, who
Okay.
started it,
Was she
and my
American?
mom's.
No, she's
Sorry,
was she like
no, she is
Anglo-Indian or
Indian.
something?
I there she's going.
Okay, go on. Right. Yeah. Forgive my
My mom's. Yeah,
ignorance.
yeah, that's somewhere to the south of India.
Yeah.
My mom's name is Margaret Peter.
Okay. Okay. Very good. And you also talked about how people who wanted amenities in their school for their children, like people, that's what took them away from the school, because they were not so I guess not so interested in the vision. So it doesn't seem, and you also said it school attracted not so wealthy people. What was the fee structure like? How was the school supporting itself? um
So initially, it was, I think, all the Christians, I think till I passed out to that phase, Christianity was the prosperity gospel had not really influenced the charismatic movement in Mumbai that much. I think it was there, but not so highly influenced. So people sought Christian education like anything, and they would take risks to make sure that their children, they would pull them out of good reputed schools. Like I know one of my classmates was from Bombay Scottish, which is one of the most expensive schools back then here in Mumbai. And they came and they studied in my mom's school. So they pulled them out from like the best schools in Mumbai and would get them here. But I think so back then, I think the free structure mm, was enough. And then we were also at a point where we were under another church and under this other school. So they kind of helped us as well. When we started off, initially we were doing well. We were able to pay the fees, and the fees was not much, man. I can't remember the exact amount, but I think it might be something like what 2,000 rupees a month or something like that. Not more than that, 3,000 rupees a month uh, back then. And yeah, but towards the end, it was really tough because the church had to bear the load to pay the rent of the place. Some of the students would not pay their fees, and like all the numbers had gone down because I think when before she shut, there were like 25, 30 students or something like that in 2020. So not a lot of them were interested in Christian education because of this.
yeah, that's good. So like, something I really appreciate uh, from what I'm hearing from about your mom's school is that if things are not flying, like if there's people losing out on the vision or something like that, she isn't like still hanging on to like a dead corpse of a institution. She
Mm,
was willing to let go of things.
mm,
It's better to be alive, and uh, it's better to be it's better to die well than to live like a zombie, which is
mm,
unfortunately, I think, what has happened with a lot of educational institutions in India. At some point, vision drift happened with many missionary, most, if not all,
mm.
missionary institutions.
Yeah.
Vision drift happened, and there was temptation to take money from either someone
Mm,
like that mysterious person whose name you
yeah.
didn't share, or the government or anybody, like, right, like, who's dangling carrots but like wants to change the vision of the school. And I think
Yeah.
one of the great lessons for us through all of this episode of your mother school is that, you know it's better to die well than to live like a zombie. So I appreciate that. I only wish there was more like paper trail with respect to just the story of it, so that it
Yeah.
can be an inspiration for others to do the same. Like, we may not have all the money, we may not have all the resources to like build swimming pools and like
Mm,
amazing institutions, but we can have still that same vision. And as long as we're able, we keep doing it and doing it and doing it, and more people do it. So that would be, you know really like wonderful for me to
yeah.
see, particularly.
Yeah.
I would love to like find out more stuff about your mom's school and put it somewhere for people to uh, be inspired by.
Sure. I'll think of maybe, I don't know, any ways we can help, or we can
Yeah.
think of any things, documents or whatever. I don't, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, yeah, I think that would be worthwhile. And then you mentioned the last, this is kind of my last question, I think, for now, is that you mentioned like ninth and 10th you did in the like normal school system. Was it ICSE? um
My 10th, I did in the normal school system.
okay.
I did it, I actually did NIOS. So,
Okay,
when
yeah.
she had to leave, this whole switch that happened when they wanted her to do only moralistic teaching, and when she had to leave is when I was in the 10th grade. And they kind of willfully failed some of us, and they were like, you get like, they have to do their ninth again. My mom was like, it's okay if he does his ninth again, but we're not going to change uh, the go to only moralistic teaching. We have to teach the Bible. And so their thing was like, do you want to make everyone pastors? She was like, no, I want them all to be good Christians, wherever they are. If they're a doctor, they're a politician, whatever they are, that they know the God of the Bible well, and that they live it out, and that they're good Christians wherever they go. So they couldn't get that concept, and they were just head bound. So she had to leave. And so when she left, she pulled us also out, me and my younger brother. And I was like, now after ninth grade, I had to do my 10th grade. And so in Mumbai, in India, we have a state subjects as well. So if I had to do SSC, which is a normal board system, you have to know Marathi. And I had not done Marathi in my school, because we were following ICSE back then, which is like the Delhi board, the international board thing. Um, but the schools that had those boards were just like two or three of them, and they were super expensive. We couldn't afford it. And so I had to do through this thing called an NIOS, which back then was counted like the worst way to pass out from. But I had no other option. And so I had to go out of that. And even some of my friends also passed out of that. But I think God is gracious, man. When I look back, all that never affected my job or anything. God's been good to us through all that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Glad to hear it. So it is like different people I've talked to, they do talk about NOS. Like, if you're
Yeah.
doing homeschooling,
Yeah.
then
Mm,
you have to kind of rely on
yeah.
open board to get this kind of accreditation. uh
Later on, what my mom did was when she started again,
mm,
re- so we always try to get recognition of the government, but unless you pay them bribe, you can't get it through. Back then, the bribe was like 1 lakh, 2 lakhs. Now it's like I think 25, 30 lakhs or something.
mm.
I don't know now how much it is. But anyway,
Bribe inflation.
yeah, what she would do is she would go to other schools, and she said, you know what, I have a Christian school,
Mm,
and I want to run it. We've applied for recognition, but they're asking for bribe. We can't pay it. If you allow us students to pass out of your school, it will benefit your school because these guys they'll do really well, and so you'll get top class students are passing out, and then also you'll help us at the same time. So then initially there was this one school, Don Bosco. It was like, okay, let them do like an entrance exam. And so these guys like knew more than what the teacher in their school was teaching in their 10th grade.
Mm,
So they were like, hey, no, we want these guys. And then he wanted them to pay some money. And so, yeah, these guys would keep topping in their school. So they would have my mom's students on their school name.
mm,
So they would get the credit for all the 9 years that she would invest into these kids. But yeah, that's
interesting.
how they passed out afterwards to the state board from other schools,
Interesting.
which allowed us out.
Interesting. So something, and I think I'll close with this. Something interesting that Pastor Wilson mentioned to me is that, when I brought up the question of accreditation, he said,
Mm,
like, so what it seems like you need is not just an alternate education system, but also an alternate economy. So
mm,
what you need to do is, like, if you work towards till high school or like till college level, then you sign a bond with people saying that you will recruit
mm.
people from our institution,
Okay.
10, 10, 15 years from now, when they're in, they're leading they have their own business, they have their own, uh,
Mm.
they are under obligation to recruit people from said institution that they graduated from
Okay.
themselves.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
So that way, like, given enough time, if we are persistent, uh,
Yeah.
it can, like, build a reputation on its own. It can build a accreditation on its own. It's a small
True, true.
sub economy. So that is something, I'm thinking about, something definitely which I don't have the wherewithal to do, in the sense, like, I'm not a businessman, but that's just
Mm.
an idea to put in there, which reminds me of, the importance of, don't mind my baby crying
No, no, it's okay.
in
It's
the
okay.
background. So yeah, like, which brings me back to the importance of just the centrality of church, right? Like, I think
Yeah.
more than anything, it's like Christians, like-minded Christians, who understand worship, who understand what their life is about, and what
Yeah.
it means to be a Christian in a pagan
True.
culture, you know. So
Yeah.
that
In
is
the
that.
early stage, many of the parents would also come and teach. So they would volunteer. They would take like half days on certain days. So I remember one of my like seventh, eighth grade, my geography teacher, he was working in the secular world, but he would take a day off, those 2 days off in the week and come and teach. His wife would do it. A maths teacher who had his own, he was a Christian. He had his own, what do you call it? You know, these classes, maths classes. He was a South Indian. He was excellent in maths.
Mm-mm.
And so he would volunteer to come and teach without taking a fee. So there are many people who would not get paid. They just come
Yeah,
in because it's Christian education and they wanted to
nice,
invest back in. And so they would come and
very
teach.
good. Yeah, I think that's something like that we'll have to do. Here in Moscow, we have these things called homeschool co-ops. So it's
Mhm.
like 6, 7 families. They get
Yeah,
together and educate their children together. So one parent might be good at physics, one parent might be good at, literature. So they all, like, pool in resources
yeah,
and do
yeah,
stuff together, which almost is similar to what you're saying, except here your mom was kind of spearheading and others were kind of,
yeah.
following her lead in that. So yeah, that's really helpful and really encouraging that, like it says in Book of Job, like, wisdom will not die with us.
Mhm.
Like, people have gone before us, and, people will come after us. uh,
True.
and so it's encouraging to hear of this story. Thank you, um, for your
So,
time. Thank you
thank
for,
you.
yeah, I'm going to stop recording now.
Okay.